going on, everybody? Welcome back to my random horror review series. I am your host, Moon616, and thank you once again for stopping in, guys. Yes, episode 90 is coming at you live here, and we've got another one from Arrow Video for y'all today. And we're going to take it back to the 90s, specifically 1994, which is a little bit ironic considering we just did the top 10 of 1994 on my podcast. And yeah, this one showed up actually a little bit late, so I never got to watch the 4K in prep for that show. So this is actually a second time, well, the second time I've watched this movie in the last probably month. I've watched this movie 4 or 5 times overall in my life. The very first time I saw this film actually was when it came out in 1994. But with that said, we have Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. Yes, with an absolute all-star cast in this film, man. We got Robert De Niro, who plays the monster in this film. Of course, this one is actually starring and directed by Kenneth Branagh, which I think he does a fantastic job in the lead role in this film. Helena Bonham Carter, who plays Elizabeth, Victor Frankenstein's wife. She's a fantastic actress. Tom Hanks, Ian Holm, John Cleese, who plays Professor Waldman in the film. So just an all-star cast in this film, man. Like, what could you... Right there, it's already epic. You know, it's produced by Francis Ford Coppola, who was just coming off Dracula a couple years prior, so you got to tackle the Frankenstein and stuff like that. So, for the people that don't know, this movie right here, which is titled Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, which is supposedly supposed to be more of a direct adaptation of the source material, hence why it's called Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. Because if you're familiar, which you probably are if you're watching this review, the 31 Frankenstein, there's a lot of differences in that film to the source material, where this one is more or less like the source material. There's actually a special feature on here that actually basically kind of compares the source material to the film and things like that and stuff, so which is kind of cool. But get into a quick little synopsis of this film, which I probably don't really have to get into because it is the story of Frankenstein, and I'm pretty sure everybody's very familiar with the overall story of Victor Frankenstein. So basically, Frankenstein suffers a tragedy in his family. His mother dies giving birth to his brother, and it really affects him. And so he makes it his life goal to try and conquer death. And so he grows up, he becomes a doctor, a professor of science and stuff like that. So he goes off to school where he meets Professor Waldman, he's kind of like a little bit of an alchemist. He's doing alternate science and things like that. And Victor Frankenstein's life goal is to basically conquer death. By conquering death, he wants to like create life that really is superior to the one that we have, where you pretty much can't die. So ultimately he ends up creating this monster out of death, and right away, so after he creates this monster, he realizes that it's not exactly what he wanted it to be. He tries to destroy it. If that doesn't work, the monster, played by Robert De Niro, escapes with his lab coat, and he heads off into the real world, where ultimately he is treated like shit. He gets to see the horrors of the real world, how mean-spirited people really are, into a disease-riddled world too, actually. So he gets to see all the horrors of that. He gets all huddled up months down the road. He's all in this barn, his family's barn. They don't know he's there. And ultimately, one of the biggest differences in this adaptation, with stemming from the source material, is Frankenstein in this film learns how to talk and learn and read and stuff like that, where he does this in the middle of the film, ultimately to learn why he was created and how he was created. So then he plots this revenge against Victor Frankenstein because he's pissed off that he even exists and stuff like that. So kind of a different little storyline, but yeah, so that is the setup to the film. Now my thoughts on Frankenstein 1994, Mary Shelley's Frankenstein 1994. Now, I've always had this minor fondness for this movie, and this is the best I've ever seen. I will say right off the hop, the 4K transfer is fantastic, and it really should be, considering this is pretty much an epic film. It's a period piece that is shot brilliantly, it's acted well, it's got great locations, it's got great costumes. The score is very, very booming in this, which I will admit I'm not the hugest fan of the score in the film, but the sound mix in this is fantastic. So the whole presentation here for this type of epic film is really, really fantastic. And I've always had a distinct like for the Frankenstein adaptations, and I just like the story of it. I like the story of creating, life out of death, and the idea of conquering death and things like that. And that's really what this one's about. Now, with that said, I like the story and all that type of stuff, but I've never been a huge fan of this adaptation of this movie. I'll come out and say that straight up. I do think it's a very well-made film. Like I said, all those specs are really, really good, and you can't go wrong. Got an all-star cast, and I think everyone does really well in this film, especially Helena Bonham Carter, who plays Elizabeth in the film, is fantastic too, which this one kind of takes it a little step further too, from the adaptation of the book too, where it kind of goes into the Bride of Frankenstein stuff, and she's got some really, really great scenes in the end of the film on that note and stuff like that. But my biggest problem with this film is overall is just the pacing. Now, it runs 2 hours long, which seems like it's really long, and this is going to be kind of a contradictory statement right here, but a lot of times, we always say that, you get the first 90 minutes for free, and then after that, you really got to work for it. But with a story that's so layered like this one, where you have the whole life and death thing, and then you have the contrast with the monster in the real world, and everything that's going on, the storyline is so layered and things like that. And that's where I feel like the screenplay kind of fails itself a little bit. There's so much going on here, and I feel like there's so much of a lull in the middle of the film. I'm not the hugest fan of Frankenstein learning to read and talk and things like that in the source material. I've never really been a big fan of that. I prefer the Frankenstein that's kind of more of the deathly monster, just kind of struggling with things. But in this one, he becomes smart and becomes what man really is, an asshole. So, with that, it's like, I feel like it takes a lot away in the middle of the film. It gets a little bit boring. It gets a little bit tedious. I know a lot of people really like that whole stuff with the monster and things like that. But this is where my problem lies. There's a 2 hour running time, and it kind of snail paces itself up into the third act, where all the goodness is really supposed to happen. And it kind of does, but with this movie running 2 hours, I feel like it runs too short. If they had to cut down stuff in the middle and extended the end, where that's where the extended running time really should be. There's so much stuff happening in the end of the film where they get into the whole Bride of Frankenstein thing where Elizabeth, something happens to her, and Victor Frankenstein has to resurrect her, and then she ends up dying again, and blah, blah. All these things that are happening, but it just clips along so fast. Like, the whole revenge aspect to this film happens so quickly, and I feel like if that had been drawn out, you would have created a little bit more suspense and a little bit more drama. I wouldn't say drama. I mean, the whole film feels like an epic drama overall, but I just feel like if they had have wrote the film a little bit different in the first half, you could have extended the second half where all the meat and potatoes happens. Like, one of the greatest scenes is where the greatest scene in this film for me is where the monster rips the heart out of Elizabeth. Man, it's a fantastic scene, and everything kind of goes haywire from there and stuff. But those are my complaints of the film, and I've always felt that about this one. It's the pacing. It's just very, very much off. And I feel like it just tries to wrap itself up so damn quick and do so much in the end of the film. And I do like that they tried the Bride of Frankenstein stuff, and I like how this one ends too. It's very poetic to the layered storyline in this film. What happens to Victor Frankenstein and what happens to the monster and things like that, because he kind of takes it into his own hands. If you're familiar with the original film, the monster doesn't decide his own fate. It's human nature. It's mankind that does that and stuff. Where I do feel like that's good. There's good things that are happening. I just don't like the way it flows in the movie. Going back to the score, I think the score to me sounds very overall generic. I know people are probably going to hate on that. That's fine. You don't have to agree with me. But I've always felt the score just feels like so many epic, films from this time, and it kind of feels like it's like a studio library sound, but it's not. It's an original score that I feel like does work for a lot of people, and I get it why it probably does, but to me it just sounds like a catalog library score that they threw into this film. I don't know what it is. I don't know what it is about it, but yeah. Anyways, if I had to rate this one, I'm coming out at 6 out of 10. I feel like this is a big time epic failure. There's everything on the outside has got going for it. It's just the screenplay. It really is the screenplay for this movie. I think it's just the pacing that kills this thing. And oddly enough, with a movie that I'm kind of hating on, I wish it was longer, because I would really love to have seen that third act extended into what it should have been. Now, like I said, picture quality, fantastic on this. It should look great. It's got great cinematography. It's shot in wide scope. It's got everything kind of going on. As for the features on here, there's a bunch of features. There's interviews. There's a brand new documentary called Mary Shelley and the Creation of the Monster, and the origins, the evolution of the Frankenstein story, which is pretty cool. If you're into the Frankenstein story and you know, just there's so many different adaptations of it out there, that it's kind of a cool watch right there. And then there's also Dissecting Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, a brand new featurette, which also goes into the differences between the novel and Kenneth Branagh's screen adaptation, which is very, very interesting also. So if you're not familiar with the source material, even like 31 Frankenstein and things like that, which I'm probably sure you are, that does break it down. That does break it down pretty interesting and stuff. And then there's some other features on here. But yeah, I mean, to me, this is one of those movies where I feel like the features are a little bit more interesting than the movie itself. I can't even believe with this cast, you know, like, you know, you got like Robert De Niro in here and John Cleese. I mean, come on, right there. Like, I mean, this thing should be classic, but even though Cleese isn't in the movie a whole lot because he does end up dying quite early in the film, but anyways, I digress, man. Mary Shelley's Frankenstein from 1994. I get why people really dig this film, and I get why people don't like it either. My biggest complaint is it's just kind of boring. It's just kind of boring, and in the parts where it should be more exciting, it goes too damn quick. That's really what it is. And I really, for lack of a better adjective, don't want to say boring, but it's kind of what it is. It really does make me want to check the time at times. You know, it is what it is, but yeah. Let me know your thoughts on this one, guys, if you're still with me in the review. I always felt like this one has been one of those films I probably should really like. I'm a huge fan of the original Frankenstein, and I'm a huge fan of so many adaptations of Frankenstein. Like, I love the Universal Frankenstein movies. I'm a huge fan of the Hammer films and various other, like, Jess Franco Frankenstein. There's so many Frankenstein's adaptations that I really love, and this is one this is probably the best made one out of every single one, and it's probably so far down on my love list. Like, it's just crazy, but I can recognize for how good it is. I just can't get the enjoyment out of it, if that makes any sense. All right, I think this is going on a little bit too long. I feel like I'm ranting now, but yeah, let me know your thoughts on this one down below. And you don't have to agree with me. You really don't have to agree with me. I hate when I put it out. I always get these shadows in my face. But anyways, guys, yeah, that's going to conclude episode 90 here on my Random Horror Review series. I will check you guys in the next one, which will be sooner than later. So, and as usual, dudes,